So, very warm welcome to the Dynami Career Conversations and to a good friend and business associate of mine, Joanna Gaudoin. I'm delighted that Joanna has been able to join us as our first guest on the Dynami Career Conversations. Now, Joanna is Managing Director of Inside Out Image, and she works with professionals on skills that often get forgotten at work, yet which are often pivotal to career progression. So they broadly fall, if I'm right, Joanna, within the areas of personal impact and relationship management, and they go across all professional scenarios.
Spot on.
Good. So let's get into this topic of office politics then. So what do we actually mean when we say office politics?
Office politics is really about how we navigate the relationships in the office and how we get things done, really. How do things really happen? So if you think about an office environment, you've got two fundamental things. You've got the formal processes that are set out. This is the way we do X, Y, and Z. This is the way we make decisions. Then you've also got different people. And of course, different people have different assumptions, values, goals, and beliefs. So you fundamentally got those two things colliding, and actually it's people navigating each other and trying to navigate around those processes. So people think, oh, it's the company that's political, but actually a lot of the time, well, all the time, it is the people, because it's how we're getting around those processes and finding our own ways to make things happen.
So what key things would you recommend people do to successfully deal with, let's say, negative office politics if it has gone wrong?
Yeah, and it's interesting how far that extends. When I run a workshop session, one of the things I do, there's a deeper diagnostic, but a quite simple diagnostic I get people to do in the room is a quick run through on some questions to assess how political they think their organisation is, negatively political.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating because I've run this before for people that are all from the same organisation in the same room. So very often they're not wanting to share their results with one another, but the results can be remarkably different. So the reason for that is you've often got a culture of a company as a whole, but then you can get differences between divisions and teams. So sometimes it's about understanding what's going on just in your team. And it's very easy sometimes, if you feel negative about politics, to just think, oh, it's the whole company. Blame the leadership team. And that could be true, but sometimes it could just be where you're working. So I would say start small. You know, when I go in and do this sort of work, it's running it for a team at a time, ideally, unless you're doing a quick lunch and learn, just raise awareness session, and try and build blocks of it. So work on the relationships close to you first. How can you start being more positive? How can you start putting yourself in other people's shoes? Because very often what happens is we make an assumption based on our knowledge of what someone else might be thinking. And so we behave in that way. And they might not be thinking that at all. And so they're thinking, well, why is this person doing that? So it can set off a whole negative stream. So if I give you an example for a moment. So imagine in the morning at work, you've just been to see somebody and you're on your way back. You think, oh, I'll go and get a coffee. And you get to the coffee machine and there's two of your colleagues there. Let's say for the sake of it, a male and female colleague having a chat by the coffee machine. As you approach, they stop talking. Now, why do they stop talking? So Ali, what could be one reason why they stop talking?
Well, clearly they were talking about me, so they've stopped talking because of that.
You were very definite about that one. And they absolutely could be. So that's one thing. They could also be talking about something confidential that you just weren't able to hear. They could also be being polite. They've stopped talking to bring you into the conversation. The conversation had just finished. If I had £1 for every time I'd heard they were having an affair, I'd be a wealthy woman.
Wow, never crossed my mind.
Well, there you go. So you could see I think that was 5. You could probably come up with a couple of others. It could be any one of those things. But in that moment, we don't think of all those possibilities, do we?
No.
We think of one. And it might be the one you said, Ali, or it could be some of the others. And what affects that is actually what mindset we're in. So how do we feel about those colleagues? Do we like them? Do we think we've got a good relationship about them? If you've just had a challenging debate with one of them that morning, you're probably going to think what you said, Ali, that, oh, you know, she's telling him about our conversation this morning, for example. Or we could generally be feeling a bit negative, loss of self-confidence just about us. So we think what you think. So there's lots of things can impact that. If we're feeling more positive, it's probably going to be one of the other ones of, you know, oh, this is, the conversation's just ended, or think nothing of it. But that's entirely in our mind, and we might never know the answer to that. So the danger is if we run off and react based on what we think without knowing it's true. So if I have in my mind, they were talking about me, you know, she doesn't like me, that is then going to potentially start a negative cycle, what you call the self-fulfilling prophecy, of we have an assumption and a belief, we behave in response to that, and then the other person is just responding to our behavior. But that can reinforce, because if it reinforces the original thought we had. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's the danger, and that's what happens at work, because those things get embedded. So longer term, if you think, oh, well, John, he never likes my project proposals, he's not going to like this one, you become defensive, it affects all the behaviours around that. And actually, there was just something going on that wasn't actually the truth, that you either heard from someone else or perceived yourself.
Yeah, so you can almost get into that negative downward spiral of making an assumption and then it kind of perpetuating itself over and over. And do you find that sometimes people think that maybe they can just ignore the office politics and step back?
Yes, is the very short answer. And that's when people often stop progressing in their career.
Right.
And so the people that say, oh, I just want to come in and do my day job, I don't want to get involved in all that. And I get, we don't want to get involved in conflict and difficulties, but actually by stepping out of that, you're often stepping out, progressing, sadly, because if you just hide in your getting your work done bubble, you're not going to be working on the relationships around you. You won't get noticed. You know, we all like to think our work will just get noticed, but there's all that work that's been done by Coleman that says actually exposure, gaining exposure, is one of the biggest impactors of career success, and that involves relationships. So there is going to be politics involved in that. So there's I do a diagnostic with people here that we work out which profile they are in terms of politics, and that looks at how they could be being perceived, and there are 10 of those. So I'm not going to go through all 10 now, but a simple way to think about it, and this is something I talk about if I run a short session on office politics, is the 4 animals.
Oh, okay.
And I should have brought some stuffed animals, shouldn't I? And it's saying that anybody is one animal. That just the idea behind this model is to get people thinking about the behaviours of different people. So if you imagine you've got a vertical axis and you've got a horizontal axis, and I know on the camera it can end up the wrong way around, so I'm going to describe rather than demonstrate. So if you imagine on the horizontal axis you've got goal orientation, and at the far left you've got people that are very focused just on their goals. So they're just thinking all the time, want to get promoted, want to get this done, want to get this project, want my name against this work. That's, you know, one extreme. The other end is people that they do want to get their own stuff progressed, but they also think about the organisational perspective and other people. So their goals are in the context of that. On the vertical axis, you've got degrees of political intelligence. So imagine highest at the top, lowest at the bottom. Okay. And that means highest, you know how to navigate it well, hopefully positively, and at the bottom, less well. So if we think about our animals, so if you imagine bottom left quadrant, let's think about it in quadrants, okay, it's the simplest for these 4. You have got somebody who's very focused on their own goals and low political intelligence, and we refer to this animal as a donkey. So if you think for a minute about the characteristics of a donkey.
Yeah.
hardworking, bit downtrodden, reliable. So this is the person that's plodding on. They're trying to perform well, you know, they do a good job, but they're not actually thinking about the organisation around them and what else they need to be doing. So almost in a bit of a silo there. If you think about the donkey's friend, so next door, so someone that's still got relatively low political intelligence, if they're typically in this quadrant all the time, but they think more about other people's goals, we refer to them as a sheep.
Okay.
Probably obvious reasons. So sheep typically not that bright, follow others. That doesn't mean the people aren't bright, by the way, but just, you know, a bit following everyone else, a little bit naive. So they are bottom right. So those two types of person, and as I say, nobody sits just within one block, and I'll say a bit more about that in a minute, are typically those that miss out on progression because just a bit, they're not able to navigate the organisation, focus on doing a good job, and of course our sheep's a bit more focused on everybody else. Okay. If we move to the top, far left, we've got our fox. So fox, as you won't be surprised by, think about the characteristics of fox: resourceful, often on their own, all those nice words we come up with for a fox, are the ones that are highly politically intelligent, and they're focused on their own goals. So actually the fox can be a challenging one to deal with sometimes. And top right is our owl. So owl is politically intelligent, thinking of self, but also organisational goals. Now, it's not to say the owl is the best one.
Okay.
Because everyone thinks, oh, I just want to be an owl. But actually, what's important is to know when to flex your style.
Okay.
So they're all in 4 neat quadrants. Actually, when people do the diagnostic, we end up with a bit of a diamond. So they might be a bit more into fox than donkey, or, you know, it's a different spread. So no one's ever just in one quadrant for the diagnostic. They're a mix, hence why it then opens out to 10 profiles. But it's about knowing how to navigate things. So actually, sometimes you might need to behave like a donkey. So even though you're politically intelligent, and normally you're more of a balance, say you're being made redundant, you want to behave more like a donkey, because at that point the organisation is getting rid of you. You know, it's all about you. What can you get out of the organisation as you leave? So it's, even though that sits on low political intelligence, some of the behaviours are sometimes useful in different scenarios. So being politically intelligent means being able to switch your behaviours for the situation in a positive way, so that you're being clear with people and transparent.
Makes sense. Makes sense. That was
think about the animals.
Yeah, a lovely simple model, and I was trying to guess what the next animal was going to be as you were talking, and I didn't get any of them right.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting actually when you think about those animals and just their characteristics, but what I do apply to all of them when I talk to people in terms of skills of helping you be more politically intelligent, they fall into 4 different categories, and I don't know if this perhaps helps. So we've got 4 animals and then 4 skill categories. So networking, influencing, factor X, and communication. So I've got a whole heap of tips, but essentially if you think about those 4 areas, factor X captures a lot of things that don't fit in the other 3. That helps you to think about how you can be more politically intelligent and navigate around the animals.
Okay, that sounds fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. Something that's crossed my mind as well, because obviously now we are still kind of in lockdown from COVID-19. How's that kind of virtual working had an impact on office politics? Have they just disappeared since we've all been working?
Well, this is the interesting thing, and I don't think we'll fully know until we go back to the offices to some degree. But it certainly won't have disappeared. I think if anything, it could have become worse, because if you think at home, we've lost a lot of the cues. So you could say in some ways we've lost some of the things that help us develop negative assumptions, but we can read people less well. We don't just see them around. We don't see what's going on. We don't know who's having conversations. Of course, in the office, we don't know about all the conversations that go on, but at home, we definitely don't know. We don't know if our boss is actually ringing up our colleague a lot more and relying on them more than us. what's going on with that relationship. We don't have that visibility, whereas when you're physically with people and the casual, people call it different things, but coffee machine conversation, or just stopping by, you learn a lot that way. And everything now has to be full of intent. If you think about it, you can't just stop and have a chat with someone. You have to ring them up, and that seems a bit weird unless you have a reason. Unless you're particularly friendly and just call to say hi. I know there is some of that going on, but I certainly have, I think it's 2 clients. One of them I can think exactly who it is. The second one I can't think who it is, but very senior clients. They are finding their bosses have become micromanagers.
Right.
So they've essentially shut them out of a lot of stuff because they just think, well, I want to take control. And whether that's because, I don't want to make any assumptions here, they're not sure what's going on at home. Are people doing the work they need to? Are they being productive? They don't actually trust that middle person? It's easier to shut them out. They just want to have control. There's multiple reasons, but I think that's really interesting. And we're talking partner level people that have been shut out here. So I think it could be really intriguing. And the danger is, whilst at home we're not feeling some of the negativity so much of some of what we experience normally at work, because we're not physically there, it doesn't mean it's gone.
Yeah. And when you were talking earlier about making assumptions about people's intentions, if you're sitting alone at home and maybe it's all gone quiet, you're going to be making even more assumptions, and possibly even wilder assumptions, I imagine. So if there's anybody listening that is experiencing negative office politics at the moment, what would be your one gem of advice that you could give them?
One gem. Step back and think about the evolution of that relationship. If it's a particular person, think about, were there any key defining things that have happened? Actual tangible things that you would both say had happened. Are there assumptions you're making that could be incorrect? But it's getting people to feel heard, take away the assumptions so you can act, because otherwise you could be acting on the wrong thing.
And some of what you say resonates with me quite a lot in terms of coaching, and looking at people's different behaviors, understanding the intent versus the impact, and doing lots of good listening to really understand what's driving other people, because otherwise you're making assumptions about what's driving their behaviors.
Yes, and you're acting on what you think, not the reality.
Well, I think we could talk for a very long time on this topic,
yes.
Joanna. There's obviously a whole lot to it. That when I started with the question, so what do we mean by office politics? There's obviously loads that comes into this. But if people want to find out more about you and the work you do around office politics and all the other areas that you mentioned to really help people be successful in their professional careers, what's the easiest way for them to follow you or to get in touch?
Well, probably really easy. By my name is LinkedIn. I'm the only one on there with my name, so hopefully that's easy. And some different articles go on there too on the website. So that's one way. And then if you do message me saying you heard this interview, then I know what interested you, and I can point you in the direction for more resources. But if you do want to go straight to the website, it's insideoutimage.co.uk, and the resources, there's webinars, there's a blog, and it's searchable. So if you just type in office politics, I've written a lot of articles on office politics, so hopefully that'll help you. And if you still feel like you want to just have a conversation, no obligation, very happy to do that, to talk about difficulties you're having or how you'd like to navigate things better, then contact me and we can set that up. And then if you want to work together further, we can talk about how that's possible.
Great, that's perfect. Well, as I said, really, really interesting and obviously vast topic, Joanna. So I think I'll probably have to have you back again to uncover a little bit more of that. But thank you ever so much for coming on today and taking the time out to talk to us. I'll be very excited to get this video out and get some conversations going around office politics.
Yes, don't avoid it, because if you just leave it, it won't get better.
Well, I think that's a great bit of advice to leave it on. Thanks again, Joanna.
Thank you very much, Ali. Take
You
care.
too.
Bye.
Bye.